My name's Sean McGaffick. I'll be talking about Raster. So today's SIG is going to focus on what is Raster Manager, how it can integrate, control, and manipulate a whole bunch of different raster images. And as I mentioned, what we don't have time for, we'll push over to this part two. So you'll see in this session pretty much how to attach different types of raster formats within a DGN file. And you'll also see, we'll talk a little bit about how a geographic coordinate system is affected or how it affects raster images and so on. You'll learn about some of the preferences and some of the tools that are in there and how to display those raster images. You'll learn about display the planes that are available, the raster attachment planes for raster display and how they function. And what we'll do is we're going to start with just plain old in MicroStation. If you take a look at the MicroStation screen, we'll start here talking about Raster Manager. Let me just shut it down because, to be honest, it's right here. It's right on the home ribbon tab. You'll see an option for Raster Manager. This contains all of the tools. It's sort of when the magic happens for Raster Manager. Before we just start jumping into attaching some images and so on, I want to just take a step back and just for a moment, as what's shown on the slide there, what is raster data? Real simply, raster data is represented as a rectangular grid of pixels, right? And that each of those pixels have specific color values, and they form a picture, obviously. They're closely spaced together, and they form an image. The raster images come in lots of different formats that are out there. There's quite a few of them. I mean, everything from TIFFs, which you're used to Mr. SID files, JPEGs, and a whole lot of others that are out there. In fact, you can see on the slide here, there's a lot of formats that MicroStation works with. And that's sort of the first thing that you need to know about MicroStation and Raster Manager is we support about 70 different formats on import. Now, I say 70, but really it's quite a bit larger than that because if you include all the different types of those different formats, and what I mean by that is there's 18 of them that we support that are just read-only, things like PDF files or a Mr. SID file that are out there. We don't write them, we read them. But there's others that are out there that have multiple color modes. Some of them might be a monochrome image. Others, might be like a continuous tone and so on. All those are different types of these raster file formats. So this is where I get the idea that there's really more than 70. When you take a look at, some of the tools that are here that are shown on this slide, you've got a lot of different tools that are available under the raster tools that you see here. And most of you guys are probably familiar with, this list that's right here. That list of all of these different file formats that are out there, a lot of these have different color modes, different types of compression. So more than just the one that's shown there. Now, you might run into an image after I've told you, hey, we support 80 different types, 70 different types that are there on import, plus that are 18 that are read-only and so on. You might run into some and say, well, wait a minute, MicroStation doesn't support it. I can't pick it on the attach. You all see this right here? This is called batch convert. The batch convert option that is on the file pull down for Raster Manager is where you're going to basically convert different types of raster images. So you'll see a different list that's available here for Raster Convert. This is the majority of the ones that MicroStation works with. And then you can convert those out. And I'm not going to bore you with showing you all this to the different formats that MicroStation works best with. So keep that in mind as we go through this. If you say, well, wait a minute, I've got a format that isn't supported under file and attach, one place to certainly look is under Raster Convert. Now, we're not going to talk much about this. We'll kind of assume that the formats are all good to go, but just keep that in mind. We can convert a lot of different formats that are out there. And a good source, by the way, when you look at a raster image, some of them, as I mentioned, are read-only, others are for export, others are for import only. To know the difference between the different color modes that are out there, of the different types of compression that you might run out there, There's a link that I put into the resources for this site right here. These are the supported output file formats. This is just in a browser. This is really the MicroStation Connect Edition help files. But this is what I was referring to. We might have a format like an HMR, but in all honesty, there's two types of them that are out there. There's several different types of color modes. One is a bitonal image, so two colors versus 256 different colors, or a grayscale image. And then each one of those has different levels of compression. But you'll notice there's an option column. Site is a great place to go if we need to know, well, wait a minute, where does MicroStation store things like the location for a file? Does it store it in the raster header? In other words, in the file itself? Does it store it in the DGN? Does it store it in a separate file? This site will give you a lot of good information about what's available for these different types, because that's going to affect you occasionally. You're going to have a file such as maybe a geotiff and say, well, all right, I'm going to store that, and that needs to be in the DGN file. Well, wait a minute. No, it actually needs to be in the geotiff in the header itself. You can see there's different formats of those. So it gives you some good information about it.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you want to see more such series, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you next time.